Welcome back to another episode of Harmonious at Lunch, the show that fuels your business success. I'm Brandon Gano, your host and guide through the world of harmonious business growth. Today, we're unlocking powerful strategies with industry experts to help your business thrive. If you're a business owner, entrepreneur, or executive, you are in the right place. Join me and our incredible guests today on the journey to clarity, growth, and success. It is time to revolutionize your approach to business. Let's dive in with another episode of Harmonious at Lunch. Welcome back into some more bite-sized business advice. In today's episode, I am very nervous for because we're talking about podcasting and how to use podcasting to build your brand authority. And I'm very self-conscious. Our guest is absolutely incredible. There's no reason for me to feel that way. And she's an absolute rock star. Leanne Scott, welcome to the show and thank you for being here.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me. And please don't be nervous because we can just talk podcasting all day long.
I know. I definitely could. I absolutely love podcasting. I love this medium. But I feel like you're going to point out all of the flaws in what I'm doing without doing it to me. I'm just going to be very self-conscious about everything you're saying. So how about this? I'll call them out if I feel triggered, and then the audience will know what not to do when hosting a podcast. How about that? But no, I really do. I love this medium. I started podcasting about a year and a half ago as a host. I've been on a number of podcasts as a guest, and I really do agree with you. It is the number one platform to build brand authority these days. But give me your background and sort of your history in podcasting and what led you to this point, because it's a very interesting career.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been in content marketing for the last 20 odd years. And when I started in content marketing, we still had to custom build websites. There was nothing like WordPress. There was no drag and drop or Canva to do your design. Anyway, so I've been through the whole blog process, seen that rise and fall. And the thing that I love the most about podcasting, which is how I ended up here, is that when we speak to people, when we share our story in our own words, we're able to really allow our genius and our passion and our excitement to spill out of us. Give somebody a video script and they can't get the words out. But if you have them in conversation, they completely forget about the camera rolling and they just allow the real authentic self to come through. And I think that's what people are craving. After COVID, we're craving that real connection with someone. And podcasting, I think, is the only medium that allows you to do that in marketing.
Yeah, I love it. I do just want to highlight when you're talking about your history in content marketing, you kind of made it sound like you're from the Stone Ages with websites where you can drag and drop. It's funny how far we've come. But I think you're right. Everything you said is just, it's so easy to have a conversation. And actually, a fun fact, that's why I started this show, because I knew that we needed to do marketing for our company. And I was like, oh, can't even imagine setting up a camera and speaking to it and putting my thoughts out into the world. That sounds dumb. Let me take the efficient way and just talk to other people, and we'll put that stuff online. And so was born a podcast. But you mentioned using podcasts as more of a tool to get yourself and your thoughts out there. Do you help people host podcasts like this one where they're interviewing guests or more like solo episodes?
Oh, both. You would be surprised. Like, you are incredibly good and comfortable doing the interviews off the fly, but some people really need some support and coaching through that. Not everyone is born a good host, but anyone can be taught to be a good host. And the other side of it is if you're using it as a business builder, as a growth engine, what you have to have is some strategy behind it. So you can't just shoot and hope that it's going to work. You've got to have content pillars. We have to be strategic about the guests that we bring on. So what's their purpose? Are they there as a rock star? Are they there as a potential customer? What is the purpose of having that guest? And then once we've had the guest, how do we leverage that relationship? So I think that kind of sums up how we work with people, but it can be either or. Solo podcasts are actually harder to do, way harder to do than interview. I hate to do a solo, but solo podcasts are incredibly, incredibly important for positioning. So if you're an expert, what you need to do is use your solo podcast to showcase your expertise, to show who you are, what you stand for, to show your skill set. And then obviously when you're with a guest, you have to allow the limelight to shine on them a bit more than on yourself. So there is a balance. So I like people to do a bit of both.
Yeah, I like that approach. I want to talk about the different strategies that you mentioned. But before we get there, I am curious. So when you're using, or when you're thinking about using podcasting to build your brand authority, you just said the solo is so much harder. However, in the networking group where we met, we're both a part of, the Connective, shout out. Actually, this is the second episode in a week where we've mentioned the Connective. So for those of you listening, you should check it out. But you said it's important to mix up the type of episode so that your audience and the listeners don't get bored, right? So if this show is, I only do interviews, because I would, like I said, I would never, ever get on camera by myself. Who wants to hear me talk? How do you do that? If you're trying to build a brand, do you mix in the solo episodes? Do you just have different guest types? Like, what's the strategy behind that?
So I like to start the first one off, first probably 2 as solos. And that is really to showcase you as a business owner, especially if you're a coach or a consultant or an author. If it's a B2B, not so much, but then I would say you would have 1 or 2 business leaders from the same company on those first initial episodes. And then we look at potentially bringing in a prospective client, or you would bring in a very happy client, because then you're able to showcase in real time that transformation. So where did they start? What were their challenges? What have they experienced now? How's it been working with you? And that's all weaved in through the story of the podcast. And people love to hear success stories. So that works incredibly well. But you want to be able to showcase that you are the right person to support that client. And if you think of it this way, is that 89% of the buying decision is made before anyone's picked up the phone to talk to you, which means that you have to have given them enough deep information to A, get to know you, B, see if they actually like you, so that by the time they get on the phone, it's just a case of, I've made my decision, how much is it, and let's see if it is actually a good fit.
What is a phone? Do people still use those? Is that how business is done?
Apparently, it's really, really effective if you pick up the phone and have
really
a conversation.
Cool. Sounds amazing. I gotta tell you.
Really cool. I must say, when mine rings, I'm like, oh, why is it ringing?
Who knows?
Why don't they just text or send a WhatsApp?
So pick up the phone is a loose term then for reach out to you to have a conversation. I like it. Okay, so then let's go down this path of strategies. I'd love to hear maybe how you helped a client through this, but identifying, okay, what's the format for this podcast? How are we using it to A, build our authority, but then also B, get clients, whether it's the guests or through the audience? I'm really curious about that. And I just want to make a full disclosure statement beforehand. I suck at this. Like there's no part of podcasting I'm worse at than actually turning it into something usable in the form of sales or relationships. I use it to meet really cool people and have awesome conversations, and then people get to listen. So Leanne, thank you for playing along with me, but how do you help, or how have you helped people analyze what strategy to use?
Absolutely. So it comes down to that very first meeting, which is, what is the route to revenue? Because I can tell you now, everybody goes, oh, it's not about the money. But 3 to 6 months in, they're all like, oh, actually, this is costing a bit. Like, where's the revenue? So I've learned over the years that the number one question is, what's the route to revenue? Where do you make your money, and what do you want to be known for? So it doesn't matter what size business you are, who you are in business. Those are the two fundamental questions. What do you want to be known for, and what's the route to revenue? So if we look at, if you were, say you're a CEO of a company, and ultimately what you're looking now is starting to exit that company and go down the route of coaching, your route to revenue is a coaching program. So now we know that the content that we have to develop needs to showcase that set of skills. Or maybe you are the CEO of a company or the sales director of a software development house, and your route to revenue is a big software development project, in which case who do you need to speak to is CTOs, who will ultimately have the decision. And then how do we make sure that that route to revenue ends up in project scoping? So in the beginning, we need to know what are those pillars that we want to touch. And then if we know that, we can then start to mold the content around that. Make sure that it's empowering the sales team or the sales process to help the buyer make a decision. And once we know that, we can then also insert CTAs, so calls to action. And that may be as simple as book a discovery call. It may be download a playbook. It may be fill in a form. But if we know where we're trying to go, then we can engineer the listener's journey. And I think that what happens is most people go, I want to talk about X. So they start having conversations, but because there is no clear route to revenue, we can't engineer it. So we can't make sure the calls to action are correct. We can't make sure the links are in the right place. We can't use dynamic advertising to remind people of what we want them to do. So you have to think of the full process, and that we do right at the start.
I like that. So how do you start to engineer that process, thinking that the route to revenue may be 6 to 12 months out, right? In a lot of cases, it takes time to get the podcast out there, unless you have a big advertising budget, which I'm sure you work with as well sometimes. But what does that path look like? Because I know a lot of people quit podcasting before they reach episode 10 to 20, so they never really see the results, right? How do you paint that picture for your clients, for people who want to build a podcast, and then also set the expectations appropriately that you may not see anything from this for the next 6 months?
Oh my goodness, that's the biggest question and hurdle at the same time. So we know that probably only 44% of podcasters actually get to episode 8. Wow. Like, that's insane. But what we also know is that the magic starts to happen at episode 50 to 100. So some people might hit it at 50, others will have to wait till they get to 100. Can you speed that process up? Absolutely. But it stands that those are the magic numbers. So what we need to do is we go, right, who is it that you're hoping to hear, that you want to connect with, sorry. And what we want to make sure is, how do we get you there as quickly as possible? How do we track who that is? So we use some growth strategies. It does require some paid promotion to be put behind it. But what I always encourage people to do is, let's reduce your production cost. Like what we're doing here is perfect. You don't need any more production than this. And let's put the budget that other agencies will be pushing you to spend, let's push that behind growth. Because then I can say, this week, 250 to 300 downloads came from your exact ICP. And here's the breakdown of the job titles, the companies they were from, and their geographical regions. Now we push that through. Because we've got strong calls to action, we can pull them into pipeline. So we attract them that way. And then we then track those listeners from passive listener right the way through to closed opportunities. So now I can very quickly start to show the host and the host company that we are having an impact on their pipeline. Ultimately, I can't close the deals for them, but I can ensure that the objections that they're getting in the sales process are addressed in the content process. And that's how we close that flywheel loop, to make sure that I can keep them in the game long enough to start seeing results.
That's such a brilliant strategy too, because you're getting feedback from the sales process. If you know people are constantly objecting to whatever it is, price, let's use that as an example, and you just do a couple of episodes on exactly how that price is justified, you've overcome that objection without actually having to overcome it in real time, because this is an authentic conversation versus an ad that says that very same thing. Well, that's an ad. Of course, they want me to believe that, right? I love that
100%.
process.
100%. And then what you're able to do is give your sales team another way to follow up. Because now customer has objected about price, as the example. And you go, that's not a problem. I understand your resistance, your reluctance, understand your concerns. Tell you what, why don't you listen to this episode and this episode? It might help you understand where we're at and enable you to make a decision. So now the sales team doesn't have to argue it, because it's already been done in podcast form.
Yeah, I love that so much. You brought up something before this. I want to ask this as the last question. You said something about a sales director hosting a podcast or the CEO hosting the podcast. How do you decide who is the actual host of that podcast for a company? Does it depend on what their strategy is, or does it maybe depend on the quality of the host, so to speak? I want to say that delicately. Like, how do you navigate who's actually going to host this podcast?
Yeah, that's a very controversial question. No, it's actually, it is, it's simple, but not always easy. So what we want is, like I've said right at the start, not all hosts are created equal. Now, you can teach someone to be a good host, but the whole point is that you have to be engaging. Now, that doesn't mean that they have to be all singing and dancing public speaker, but they at least have to be interesting. So when we're choosing who to host, we look at who's got to build the relationship. The person who hosts also has to have enough credibility and gravitas to make sure that when the invitation goes out, the person receiving the invitation goes, oh, yes, I want to be hosted by this person. I want to be on the podcast. If you send a junior in and you invite the CEO, they're like, I don't think so. So you have to balance the charisma with the relationship that you're trying to forge, tie the two together. And sometimes that even means getting an external host. Although I would always use that as a last resort. Now, I know a lot of companies don't do that as a last resort, but if you're trying to have a conversation about a very technical product or service, and you need somebody to understand the nuances, then you want to make sure that the person who's hosting can answer those questions, can dig deep into that conversation. I can host most things, but if I don't know the nuances of a particular industry, it's going to be incredibly difficult to get a deeper conversation in a podcast episode going. It would keep me quite superficial, which then means that we don't attract the buyers and the listeners that we're really after.
Well, I don't know why you're here, because if there's one thing I don't have, it's gravitas. So fun fact. But no, this has been a phenomenal conversation, and like I said in the beginning, I really do believe that this is one of the best, if not the best tool to do exactly what you said: build a brand authority, fill a sales pipeline, meet amazing people. So if you're not podcasting for your business, I strongly suggest you reach out to Leanne and at least consider the conversation. So Leanne, you have a podcast about podcasting. You have a website, you have a free giveaway for us. Where can the listeners learn more about you and see if this is a good fit for them and their business?
Absolutely. The place that I'm most active is LinkedIn, and I love to have conversations. Obviously, that thing we were talking about earlier, the phone, I'm more than happy to hop on a call and answer some questions. That way, it's really good to just talk things through to see whether a podcast fits as part of your strategy or not. You can always find me podcastinabox.com with the dashes in between. And then I have got a free podcast growth playbook that you're welcome to. Brandon's going to link it down the bottom here in the it's a good place to start. It gets you thinking. It shows it's exactly what I use with my clients in that first call, and it will help you to see what you need to think about, how you need to think about it, and then establish where to go from there. And I'm always open for a free cup of coffee.
I love it. I should probably have checked out that download before I started this podcast. So don't be like me. At least plan your podcast out before you get started. So Leanne, thank you for that giveaway. And thank you for being here. This was such a fun conversation.
It was amazing. Thank you so much.
For those of you watching, listening, as Leanne said, it's all down below in the show notes, podcastinabox.com, the giveaway, LinkedIn, whatever this phone thing is. I'm sure you could find it down there too. Thank you for listening. We'll see you tomorrow on another episode of Harmonious at Lunch. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Harmonious at Lunch podcast. Make sure you subscribe on whatever platform you're on, and we want to invite you to join us in the Small Business Success Facebook group, our private group where guests and listeners come together to grow your business. We want impact-driven entrepreneurs who are ready to go to the next level in this group so we can all share ideas, collaborate, and grow our businesses together. Go to whatif.com/group, and we want to invite you to join today. See you on the next episode of Harmonious at Lunch.